Dwayne DiRosario from TFC, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Ash. So Maya, all right. I'm looking at it. I'm like 647-883. It's Angela's. Anyway, good for you. Nice try.
How many?
I'll get you one.
Mine.
All right. Maya, this is funny.
She's only gonna put a couple in there. Don't tell that.
Mitch Korman.
Mitch Korman.
There you go, Mitch.
All right, I don't know mine either. It's taking a long time, guys. If this is Maya,
Amanda.
Amanda Prasad.
All right. Hey.
So it's a great read. So here's what we're gonna do. So Sabrina, Ashley, Justin, Ravi, Jason, and Jerry are all here after we talk. If you have any questions about anything that we're going over. All right, but instead of starting this presentation like a standard presentation, what questions do you guys have? What are you concerned about? What are you wondering about? Just anything. I want to write it on this board, and then we're going to look at this at the end and just see if we've addressed those questions. Like Dinesh, what are you curious about?
Well, one of the questions I had was can a first-time buyer purchase a rental property?
Yeah. So rentals. Okay. How about you, Ruella? Do you have anything that you're curious about?
Sure. When is it worth it to rent
Yeah.
rather than buy?
Rent versus buy. That is a very common one, right? When should you be renting? When does it not make sense to buy? Because everybody, like Toronto is one of these places where you say, well, everybody says you should buy a home, right? But maybe there's times when you shouldn't. Kieran, anything you're curious about?
Will interest rates come down?
Yeah, great question. Yes. Right? But there's more to that, all right? Anybody else? Crystal, you got any questions you want to ask?
It was like a gift, like your parents
Yeah.
gifting you.
Bank of Mom and Dad. Bank of MD. All right. Ryan, did you have something?
What's the best way to invest?
Invest. You know what? I swear, like the younger generation grew up understanding that building real estate assets is something so critical. And it's a great thing to see because as young as 20, 25, people are saying, okay, let's pool our resources, let's buy a pre-construction, let's buy a multi, let's go to Hamilton and buy something. It's smart, right? So just methods for investment, all right? Anybody else? Just shoot them out. Anything that you're curious about, that you want to kind of pick or learn about today. Anything at all. Yep, Miguel.
Is it worth going for aiming for 5% or 20%?
Yeah, so down payment. Should you get in the market with your 5% down payment or should you save up? And by the way, we're going to talk about what CMHC insurance is, or basically high ratio mortgage insurance. And you know, these are good questions to go over. Anything else anyone's curious about? Yeah, Kieran.
For first-time home buyers, is it better to buy brand new or a used home?
So new versus used. We call it resale. I don't know if it's like used, but new versus used. Let's go with that. All right. Anything else? Anybody else got questions that they're curious about?
How does pre-construction buildings work?
Yeah, so pre-con, I'm just understanding the nature of buying a pre-construction home or condo, right? And there's a whole sort of wealth of knowledge that we have on that we're going to talk about today too. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Listen, as we go through, this is a conversation, all right? So if things come up, just ask, right? Because I'll bet you, whatever you're thinking about or curious about, someone hopefully has the answer, and the other people in the room might also be thinking the same thing, all right? So this is a great start, all right? So I'm gonna just pick one, this, all right? And the first topic, first kind of sort of like soundbite that I want you guys to understand is when you buy, what that leverage looks like, all right? So I need a volunteer. Anybody else? Anybody? Okay, I'm gonna pick somebody. Ryan, come on up here, all right? All right, good, Ryan. So listen, so Ryan, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now, Ryan?
23.
23, beautiful. I love that. And he's already at a home buying event. This is amazing, all right? So it's January 2023, all right? Let's just say Ryan comes at this junction in time to our event, all right? And he digests and he says, okay, Ramy, Justin, Ashley, Sabrina, I think I got my head wrapped around this whole home buying thing. I'm gonna save really hard for the next 8 months, all right? And he saves up just 5% down on $500,000 condo. Nothing extremely complicated, right? 5% down, which is $25,000 on a $500,000 condo, all right? And we're just gonna simplify this. We're not gonna talk about closing costs and all that yet, all right? So this is time, all right? And this is money, all right? So just so you guys understand this illustration, you can start if you want. So in August, we start looking, and he closes on a property in December of 2023, all right? So he's done the saving, he does the research, we look at properties, we offer on something, and we buy something December 2023, all right? 2023, December. So what he did is he took $25,000 and he put that down on a $500,000 purchase price. How much was his property worth December 2023? 500,000, okay? And how much did he put down? 25,000. So that would mean that he's taking a $475,000 mortgage, all right? So right now he owes $475,000 to the bank, and he owns a property worth $500,000. That means that his equity in the property is $25,000, all right? Here's what happens. He goes into that property and he says, you know what? I have a friend who has a connection on appliances, and I have another person who's gonna put some hot lights in. We're gonna just jazz it up a little bit, all right? And we're gonna get a case of beer, we're gonna paint, all right? I said, okay, awesome, right? We buy this property for $500,000. He's got $25K in equity, and every year, on average, for the next 5 years, that property appreciates by 5%, which is conservative. We've seen as much as 18, 19%. We've seen it fall, 2, 4, 5% as well. So every year, it goes up by 5% appreciation. Help me out with this, guys. 525 in year 2. Then, I guess about 555 in year 3. Then, let's just say we could sell it for about 589 in year 4. And then in year 5, it's worth 629,000. Let's just say that that's the trajectory. All the while, his mortgage, which started at 475, becomes 474. Then it becomes 472.
You can put a
little bit more. All right. Then we put it down to 460, 450, 445. All right. In 5 years, his 25,000 equity has now become. What's the math on that, Justin? I'm not being stereotypical. I just try and make sure that Justin always does the math for me, right? 184. All right. I don't know if that's right or not, but we'll go with 184. So that means his equity position has gone from 25,000 to 184,000 in 5 years. All right. And in December 2028, he says, hey Rav, all right, I think me and my girlfriend are getting serious. I want to sell this property. How much do I have in it? And what can I afford to buy? Here's a question for you. If he didn't do this, do you think he could have saved $180,000 in 5 years? I'm not a very good saver, but this is a bank account. Does everybody understand the leverage conversation here? That is the main reason why people don't continue renting. There's a very traditional saying in real estate, you're either paying your mortgage or, does anyone know the saying? You're paying somebody else's, right? Now let me interrupt that for a second. What's like an example when it makes sense to renting?
You got a girlfriend, you want to see if
You know what?
So no mass divorces?
No mass divorces, man.
My niece is in a place that I rented 100 years ago, and it's rent control. So you're paying
Rent
$1,100
control?
for a bill.
Yeah.
When the rent should be $3,500.
Yeah.
That's a good reason.
Anybody else got a reason why it makes us rent?
You want no commitments?
No commitments. That's the main thing, right? He hit it on the head. Listen, if you're not sure about Toronto and you eventually want to move to Sao Paulo, maybe don't get into real estate, all right? The main reason for real estate is leverage, but the soundbite number 2 is real estate is illiquid. Does everybody know what that means? Illiquid means buying and selling real estate it involves a lot of resources. It can involve time, it can involve money, it can involve commitment, right? So it's illiquid. I would say if you're planning to own something, own it for at least 5 years, right? If you're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy this, I'll sell it next year. I mean, really and truly, that's not the best time to be buying, all right? If you win in the game of Monopoly real estate and you buy something and next year it's worth a lot more, great, that's just a bonus. But that's not why, all right? So does everybody get this whole leverage illustration? Yeah? Does anybody have any questions about that? Dinesh?
I actually have a question. How would you go about getting approved for a mortgage?
For a mortgage, right? Good. So, if it makes sense to buy, well, what's the first step? How do you actually do it? All right? So, we've got some really qualified people about mortgage qualification. Why don't you fill in a little bit of that, Ramy? Like, let's just say Dinesh says, okay, I understand, I want to buy a home. What do I need to do? Maybe you can explain, like, the pre-approval process and getting qualified for mortgage.
So I won't tell you again what I went through when I got mine, but I mean, essentially, there's a few things that any lender is going to look at. And again, I'm here tonight supporting. I work only for TD Bank, but we've got a lot of good people, whether it's myself or alternative lenders, brokers that Ramy knows as well. So I'm just going to give you my spin on things from a bank perspective of what those steps are basically, and they're not going to be different than any other bank or any other of the lenders out there, because when you're dealing with an insured mortgage, the rules of the game are pretty much all the same, essentially. So number one, I mean, there's a capacity test the bank is going to do, okay? Capacity, just in general terms, it's your income to service the debt, along with your other existing debts that an individual might have, okay? So typically the rule of thumb that we look for when a person wants to put down 5% down, 10% down, 15% down, anything less than a 20% down payment, the box is pretty much in a box, because the insurer has rules that they need to sort of process in their underwriting department when they look at an application. And once the insurer, which Ravi alluded to earlier, it's called Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, that's one of them, that's predominantly used in Canada. They sort of insure the lender, the bank, to give the money to the individual, basically, okay? So we're gonna assess you by reasonability. So reasonability, looking at how long you've been working for, what your income is. We'll look at your current income level, maybe what your past income level was. During that period of time, how did you accumulate your savings in terms of reasonability? In terms of, is it your own genuine savings that you've been saving up with your own, patterns and so forth? So, your pay gets deposited into your account, and then you're investing in, a tax-free savings account, or, we were talking about an RSP earlier. Things like that, or it's just in your checking account. So we're seeing the gradual accumulation of those savings. And if it's hard to accumulate those savings, you can lean on, the bank of mom and dad as well to help out with that down payment. It's called a gift to the individual. So essentially, you would get like a gift letter saying that this individual is giving X person a gift for this specific property, and that's good enough for us as well. So it doesn't have to be, it can be all of your savings, it could be partially, it could be the bank of mom and dad. It shouldn't be the credit card cash advances that I was using, but if you did it like how I did like years ago, and I just looked through my bank account, nobody's gonna ask me where I got that money from, but it was borrowed. And as long as I can afford those credit card payments and this new request, it's okay. But I mean, again, you could do a little cash advance here or there. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you, right? So that's the reasonability test in terms of income and so forth and what have you. Now, what does that number look like in terms of reasonability? It's usually what's called a gross debt service ratio, or the acronym is called GDS, basically. So typically, we'll look at 35% to 39% of a household income, whether it's your sole income, whether it's your partner's income, whether it's parent that wants to go on the application. So we'll look at that income. So just for argument's sake, let's just say a combined income every year. It's gross income. That's why we call it, gross debt service ratio. It's not your net home take pay. So your gross salary is $100,000. We're going to put a ceiling of your income of 44% of that, which works out to say $44,000 for the year. When you divide $44,000, that's an annualized payment. You divide it by 12, that works out to almost $3,500 gross per month that the individual or the collective, group. And again, when I say collective, parent, it could be co-ownership. So, when I first started doing lending, one of those first-time home buyers was actually 3 of them. It's 3 women that got together. They all came up with 5% down, and it was like a duplex, and it had like a coach house on the same property. So one lived downstairs, one lived upstairs, one lived on a coach house is just like another entity on a property, self-contained unit with a bathroom, heating, whatever it is. There was like a garage actually, and there was an apartment on top, so they called it a coach house. So collectively, they all made, let's just say that $3,500 a month. So we approved them because of the fact that we look at that $3,500 a month and we break it down even more. Where does it go to? We look at a mortgage payment in relation to that gross income for the month. So basically, on a $500,000 purchase price, and again, we're only saying this because we started off the example at a $500,000 purchase price, with $25,000 down. So that $500,000 mortgage, just again, to keep the math simple, every $100,000 that you borrow today, at today's rates, and I think there was an interest rate question earlier as well, which we'll get to, it's about $500 principal and interest per month as a payment. So if you're going to borrow, say, $500,000, if the multiplier is $500 per $100,000, that mortgage payment is about $2,500 a month. So remember when I mentioned earlier the gross debt service ratio on the $100,000 amount, we said was $3,500. So now that $2,500, we're going to subtract it from the $3,500 threshold, give or take. We've got $1,000 left. So the $1,000, where do we allocate it to? Is there a condo fee in it, in the building? So this condo, I mean, I'm walking in for my first time. Let's just say it's a condo. Let's just say the condo fees are, you know, I'm thinking $400 or $500 a month. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So the bank's not going to use $400 or $500 a month out of that $1,000 that's left that we're dealing with. Remember, $3,500 minus, you know, $2,500. We've got the condo fee, but even if it's assessed at $500 a month, we use 50% of that condo fee in that calculation. So now that $1,000 less the condo fee, even though it's $500 a month, we're going to use $250. So we still have $750 to play with. You've got property taxes. Let's just say that the property taxes are $3,000 a year or $2,400 a year. Again, I'm just rounding up stuff because, you know, I'm not Chang here to do the math on the fly. I want to give him a break, right? So I'm just using round numbers. But again, that threshold that we had, you know, it's $2,400, you know, annually. That's $200 that we have to take from that. So under that gross debt service ratio, those are the factors that we're going to look at: the mortgage payment, the property taxes, a possible condo fee, or if it's a freehold property, we're going to assess some utilities. You know, what's it going to cost to run the house? It's usually just heat, because the bank figures that you can live in a home, but you have to have it heated. But you can maybe not have the hydro on and just burn a candle or whatever, and maybe you don't want to, you know, have any water and just whatever. But that, we just use heat in the equation. So there's a lot of room there for a person that's making $100,000 for that $500,000 purchase price. So to answer that question in terms of, you know, I think the question was, you know, how you qualify. I don't need $100,000 income for that specific example. I probably need maybe $75,000, $80,000, a little bit less, because that $100,000 example, I had a lot of room still to play with on that particular purchase price. So that's that capacity test in terms of, so we talked about the reasonability of how you're going to get your savings, where it's going to come from, and so forth. The income test in terms of, you know, how we're going to validate your income, what do you do for a living, what's your gross income, how do we take that gross income, where we put a, you know, percentage on it, and that's how it's going to define, you know, how you're going to get in on those gross housing costs. There's another income test called a total debt service ratio. It's the same gross debt service ratio that we just discussed, but we also allow you to have a credit card payment, or maybe a car loan payment, or maybe a student loan payment, and we can throw that into that amount as well. We get a little bit more of a buffer, and we can actually go higher on the debt side, because the gross debt service ratio number is 39% of your income, typically. And your total debt service ratio, we can go up to 44%. So that $100,000 income a year we're using, it's, you know, it's a $44,000 amount. So we'll look at your debts as well. And if we have to close debt or consolidate debt, or maybe you've got, you know, a lot more savings in your bank account to sort of play around with those numbers. All it is, it's a numbers game. And we can, you know, look at those numbers and sort of, you know, scale it down, and how we're going to, you know, make it, you know, meet that box basically. So we touched on the down payment. Your credit's got to be good, obviously. You've got to have a credit score, and, you know, even the silliest things might get you. Like, I actually pulled my credit report recently, and Bell Mobility had about 4 late payments on my account. Just because they changed the statements to electronic, I don't have a pre-authorized payment, and, you know, I was doing them. But anyways, it was a misunderstanding. But it's important that we look at your credit. Do you have a score, number one? Do you have a credit card? You know, are you using it? Is your credit score average? Is it above average? Was there an issue why it went below average? Is, you know, things like that. So that's going to be important. But as long as you're in that box for that low down payment, we can look at that for any individual at the bare minimum 5%. It gets a little bit trickier if you're looking for properties above $500,000. So it's not just a simple 5% down payment on the amount. If it's a $600,000 property, it's 5% on the first $500,000, which is $25,000, and 10% on the additional $100,000. So another $10,000 on $100,000. So potentially I now need $35,000. A lot of people get confused because they hear 10%, so they think I need $60,000 for a $600,000 price point. Well, that's not the case. It's just $35,000. The same goes for $700,000 and so forth. So $700,000 price point, $25,000 on the first $500,000, and then at $700,000, it's another, $20,000 because we have 10% on the $200,000. That's above and beyond the first $500,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Have I gone too fast on anything, or no? And I mean, anybody don't let me ramble on, because if I keep on going, we're going to be here for a long time. So I mean, put up your hand, ask a question, right? Right. So when it comes to money, I don't go to sleep, right? So those are really what we look for. And then the other cap is any of the insurers out there. There's a cap on these prices as well. So any person's sales agreement that you're actually writing, it has to be below $999,000 to look at a down payment of that magnitude. Anything $1 million and up, it's got to be at least 20% down. And again, talking from a bank perspective, you need to do 20% down, but there are other creative financing ways to, okay, I've got 10%, I've got 15%, bank and mom and dad giving the rest, or is there a private lender that might, co-bundle the mortgage, and maybe you don't pay CMHC fees, and you're paying a little bit of an interest rate on the top-up amount to sort of make the deal work. But I mean, there's ways that you can sort of look at it, just what price and what terms and so forth in terms of doing it. But I mean, income is important, credit is important, capacity for the debt, is important. A little story about the individual. So if I just see, a job letter that was just drafted that this person's making $100,000 a year, usually the bank wants to see, T4 slip from the previous year if they were there, just to validate, does this make sense, and so forth. But yeah, that's pretty much, in terms of the high ratio space, in terms of doing or answering the question on the 5% down, and just the key points are just know there's caps, being 500,000 and below, and some of the other, space. Now, most of these things are actually, I think that these acronyms and so forth are in the guide, and if not, I mean, I know this was more of a casual setting. You're gonna reach out. I have these, full, templates, brochures to send you, soft copies that sort of walks you through all this stuff. And the insurer, Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, has a great site that talks about every premium, step by step, things to, good tips in general, basically.
So just so you guys know, it's on the third page. The two thresholds.
Mm-hmm.
One's called GDS, and one's called TDS. Mm-hmm. And for rough illustration, every 100,000 carries for about $500.
Mm-hmm. More or less.
And your gross income, not after tax, before tax, whatever you make, you can use 32%?
It says 32. The reason I went a little bit higher is we will consider up to 39% on certain individuals. So, but the rule is, old school rules are 32% and 40%. The TDS cap, which is total debt service ratio, is we could look at 44 on maximum. Again, depending on good credit, so forth, what's the story. But typically, the lower, the better it is for you, because, these are tests that have been proven over the years, right? Some people might be a little bit stretched for those extremes, because there's a reason. Maybe not all the income is on paper, and, you're getting a supplement, you're getting, there's a renter in the basement that you might take on. So, maybe it makes sense to, try to get in and try to, bypass these thresholds, but we will consider a little bit more. If the credit is not that great and so forth, then yeah, there's not a lot of maneuverability in terms of changing those lower thresholds which are in there.
So just to be clear, up to 39% of your annual gross income can be used for housing. And housing is your mortgage, it's your property tax, it's your condo fees if you have condo fees, and it's your utilities, at least heat, all right? So when you're thinking about, well, what can you afford? 1/3. And I like to say, as a rule of thumb, if you, like a lot of people get paid bi-monthly or every 2 weeks or whatever, think of it like this. 1 check a month goes towards your housing. The rest goes towards long-term savings and spending. Does everybody get that? Right? If you kind of budget like that, you should be fine. Not just for qualifying, but for also just budgeting, right? Because have you ever heard anyone say, I don't want to be house poor? Right? You want to make sure that you can still live while buying a house, right? One more thing I just want to make sure everybody's clear. Does everybody get what an insured mortgage is? Is anybody not clear about that? Okay, so just to be clear, when you buy a home, traditionally, how much % do you need down? Throw out a number, 20? Right. Traditionally, you need 20% down payment. If you put less than that down, the government of Canada wants you to buy a house. Saving up 20% might take long, so they will insure the mortgage.
And the lender.
And the lender.
To give that money to you.
The body of, sort of, insurance body that insures it, usually it's called CMHC, Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. They will insure the lender when they lend you that mortgage if you're putting less than 20%. That's also in here. There's a difference between what we call a high ratio mortgage, which is more than 80% mortgage, versus a conventional mortgage, which is less than 80%. Does everybody get that?
And then the insurance, it's not free, like, obviously. So if you're putting down, it's a $500,000 price point, and it's 5% down, which is $25,000. You're going to deduct that from the purchase price because you need to come up with 5% down. So the mortgage becomes $475,000 that we talked about, and you're paying a factor of 4% on the $475,000. So in this example, again, Chang, what is it? No, it's $19,000. And the $19,000, where do I get it from? Because I just did all my cash advances like I did, and it's not like you're paying it up front. They add it back to the mortgage. So now the mortgage is $475 plus the insurance fee, and that's what you're mortgaging at that time.
Yeah.
Thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get into my first home.
And the reality, guys, is it still makes sense despite the additional costs, because the rate of savings is outpaced by the rate of equity growth. All right, and I think that that's the really important first message to drive home. Okay.
Can I tell a story about that?
Yeah.
So when I first got my license, I was gonna sell a 3-bedroom condo in Scarborough to one of my friends, and I think the purchase price was like $360,000 maybe, and he only had 5% down, and we were conditional upon financing, and we were right there at the finish line. But he talked to the mortgage broker, and he realized like, oh, I have to get my mortgage insurance because I'm under 20%. I'm only paying 5%. So he had this whole notion in his head, like, oh, I have to pay an extra $19,000 on my mortgage. Like, all of a sudden, I'm paying $379 for the condo, not $360. So he backed out of the deal. But long story short, that condo today is probably worth $900,000. So if you were to just kind of eat that $19,000 in mortgage insurance, that would be spread out between the 30 years of amortization. He would have been ahead close to $600,000 now,
so
if that was the case.
I was in that position myself personally, and this was maybe 10 years ago, and 5% is all I could come up with. It's like, I need $12,500. I think it was $250K for the condo. And I had a friend who was also looking at the same time, and he's like, yeah, but you know what? You should have 20%. Why are you putting in 5 and you're gonna pay more money on top? That's like, doesn't make sense. I'm like, it's not my money. Bank's giving it to me. as long as they give it to me, and I can move into a place, and avoid fighting at home all the time with my family, I can just move into a new place and work there, I can afford my bills, I'll do it. And that's what happened. Now, the same condo, obviously in 5 years, by the time my friend saved 20%, the condo had gone up too. Now that 20% isn't 20% anymore. Plus, I was able to look at another property and then go, hey, now I can just rent this out, find something else. Like, when you're starting out, if you have 20%, great. First-time homebuyers, if you can get into the market, get into the market.
Yeah.
It's very important. And that's what Ramy said, that's what Mitch said, that was the message. And I was fortunate enough to be working with the lawyers at the time. I wasn't a lawyer, but my income was really, kind of low because I was struggling. But then now, he took care of me. But when it came to buying, it was guiding. You need guidance, of course. And Ramy's on the right track. But getting you into a place is not to force you to be, and then you can't make your ends meet. But that's what the mortgage brokers will tell you, how much ratio you can afford and whatnot. But if you can save enough money to just get into a house, we're in a market that's different than the rest of the world. So far it's been going up and up and up. Yeah, there's curves up and down, very little, but for the most part, we've been doing really good. So, and, rents are not any less. If the rents were half the cost, different story. The rents are ridiculous right now. 2 bedrooms, like $3,500.
Yeah.
I want to add to it also. Like this is the starting point of a long journey that's going to last you the rest of your life. If you want to do something today to start that journey, pull your credit score.
Yes.
Go in your online banking and look at what your credit score is. Because if it's not 650 or better, Ramy may not be able to help you. You may not be able to afford that house or condo that you want. But what he could do is you could tell him what it is, and you could figure out a way to get it up to 800. When he mentioned missing those couple payments, you may think a credit card bill, or if it was a car payment, it's $500. Instead of a phone payment, maybe it's $80. The credit bureau looks at it the same way. You miss a few payments, you're screwing yourself if you plan on buying a house. So don't do that. Know your credit score, work on your credit score, whether you're buying next week or 3 months from now, that score's gotta be high. Is that fair to say?
Equifax.ca, you can go on and you can pull it for free. And it's a very good thing. These are the things they never teach you in school, right?
Credit Karma is great. I use it every week. It's telling me, oh, your score's gone up. I'm like, really? What did I do? And I go check it. Or it's
Some
gone.
people make the mistake of not having a credit card. They think, I'm just gonna pay everything in cash.
Yeah.
Or being
Your credit score is
being a secondary card.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Ramy can guide you to why is your credit score so low? I don't want to use my card. He'll tell you that's what's ruining your credit score.
And
You gotta use
I'll
it.
tell you quickly, just some quick tips on it. It's utilization, right? So any credit card that you have, there's a limit to it. Try to keep it below the limit. Don't go over limit. That's a no-no, because if you're at a $10,000 credit limit and you go up to $10,200, that's gonna pull you down. Missing that payment's gonna pull you down. Now again, I'm from Scarborough, right? So I figured out the ins and outs of the credit report, but let me teach you something. The minimum payment due date, especially working for the bank, right? So you learn these things. So I'm like saying, I missed this payment, but my credit score didn't change. So the minimum payment, if it's due on January, what did you say, 21st?
Still have.
It's better that you pay it before January 21st. But if it's January 23rd or 24th, you're 4 days late, it's not the end of the world, because it's not going to hit the credit report, because there's a 30-day payment, a 60-day payment, and a 90-day payment. Now you're all saying, yeah, I can, wait till next month. Don't.
Yeah.
But if you need to, it's only when you're past the 30-day interval that it's going to ding your credit report saying that you're late. But if you pay on the 25th day, it's not the end of the world. Try to pay before the minimum payment date, but I'm just giving you a tip.
So
It's not gonna be bad.
So just to wrap up the mortgage part of this conversation, the minimum down payment that you need for something less than $500,000 or $500,000 or less is 5%. You need 10% on every dollar over and above $500,000, and over $1 million, you have to have 20% down. All right. When you calculate what you can afford up to 39% of your annual income towards housing. Does everybody get those two things? Now here's the third thing, and this is the last part on the numbers, because I'm getting tired about talking about the mortgage side of it. When you say, I'm saving and I'm planning, that's when, like Mitch said, you start the process of getting the approval. Not when you want to buy, when you're planning, right? And I thought everyone here who's thinking about buying, because you want to talk to professionals and say, how's my credit? What docs do you need? How can I improve? What if I have cash income? What if I'm self-employed? What if I have a gift from mom and dad, et cetera, et cetera? And you want to ask those questions of someone like Ramy so that when it comes time and you're at the offer table, those questions have all been answered. Does everybody get that? So I would say if you guys leave here and you're like, yeah, you know what, I want to get going on this, you call one of us, and first step is pre-qualification, all right? And if you're pre-qualifying, even if you think about next year, start the process now. Does everybody get that? Okay, good. So, mortgages, I feel we beat to death, right? But that's good, because that's one of the hardest parts of this whole equation, right? The second thing is, how do you buy? All right? Who was talking about pre-construction? Somebody had said something about pre-construction, right? So generally speaking, there are two types of homes that you can buy in Toronto. You can buy a new development, a pre-construction property, or from a builder, or you can buy resale, right? We said used, right? Resale properties, all right? Generally speaking, real estate agents can help you with both, all right? And both offer different pros and cons. Does anybody want to comment on what some of the pros are of buying brand new? Jay, yeah?
Yeah, so one of the great things about buying pre-con is that it gives you time to save your money. So instead of having to come up with all the money at once, they might give you a few years to save up that money. So that's the benefit of pre-con.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can defer getting your mortgage until like four years down the road when the condo's complete. So that's what I did actually with one of my first properties. We were making great income, but we knew obviously in 4 years we would be making a lot more. So, and we have money to invest. So we just kind of put it into a pre-construction project, and look, in 4 years we'll just deal with the qualification once we get there. But we knew we were going to be making more money in 4 years anyways. So.
Believe it or not, more and more people, when they're buying their first home, they're buying it through pre-construction. More and more and more. We see it all the time. And the other thing I'll say about buying pre-construction, because I bought a few now, is it forces discipline, right? So for example, you buy a place for 500 grand, we're using 500, and there's a check due on August 26, 2023 for $20,000. All of a sudden, you're like, well, I think I'm gonna maybe not take that vacation, or I'm going to, pay my, save up, right? It forces you into, has anybody ever heard the statement, burn the ships, burn the boats? If you burn the boats behind you, if you know you have this obligation, you're going to fulfill that obligation. But if you don't have that obligation, you won't come up to $20,000 of discipline savings, right? Does everybody get that?
Yeah.
So on the pre-construction side, you have deferred mortgage, you have time to save, and it's a disciplined practice of accountability for money, right? What about the big negative with pre-construction? Who thinks they know what the big negative with pre-construction is? And not the real estate agents, but yeah?
You can't sell right away?
That's one. So it's illiquid because you're obligated until you close. There is a gray area called assignment, but we'll leave that for the second class. All right?
The builder costs in terms of closing
costs.
levy.
Closing costs,
Biggest one would be delays, I would say.
delays,
Cancellations.
and there's one more. It's more expensive,
Yeah.
right? So for example, you go take a look at a condo around here in this building. Maybe you can get one, like a 1-bedroom for 600, let's say. The brand new one is going to be 729, right? There's a drastic difference between the cost of brand new versus the cost of resale. So keep that in mind too, right? And guys, there's not one better than the other. It's just different, right? Angela's not here, but when we got married, she said, I don't want to live in a used house. That's how she viewed it, right? I'm like, come on, like nice trees, upgrades already in, right? But different people have different feelings, right? You also get to pick your finishes with your new home, which is beautiful, right? Smart money, I would say, buys resale. Because it's bottom line, you're paying significantly less because it costed the person who built it significantly less. And that's the only major difference there, right? Anybody got anything else they want to add on pre-construction versus?
We'll talk about the closing costs after.
Yeah.
So I'll just, yeah.
Pre-construction versus resale, yeah?
Reconstruction usually 20%.
Yes.
Or with resale, you could buy something with 5%.
Yeah.
Even though it gives you time, like the deposit is spread out, it's usually like 6 months, 1 year. People can't really save that quick, right? So.
Yeah.
It's a forced saving, I would look at it that way. But I've seen 10% on houses.
On pre-construction houses.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a good conversation to have with your real estate agent when you're starting the process and I think we want to buy something new. Or I think we were looking at this builder site or whatever it is, right? The other thing I'll say, so Sabrina and I, we met with someone who didn't come to one of these events that we have and they said, you know, we'd like to buy something. We're saving up our 20% for a new build because et cetera, et cetera. They had a home a month later. Actually, they got married in the backyard because they were able to buy resale, right? So understanding what you're capable of buying, I think is very, very, very important, right? First step after this, message one of us and say, how do I get started on the pre-qualification? Second step is figuring out what you want, right? Okay, so we talked a lot about mortgages. We talked about leverage, right? Those were the first two things that we're talking about. So the third thing is, okay, Rav, okay, Justin, okay, Sabrina, okay, Ashley, okay, we want to buy a house. What do we do? What would be the next step? What do you think the next step is? Book a one-on-one appointment with a real estate agent, all right? And that might sound self-serving from me, but the reality is you want to sit down and go over everything. Not just the pre-qualification, but what do you need and what do you want? Where do you want to live? Your agent should be able to guide you on more than just the stuff you can Google, right? For example, you know, Justin, what are like your favorite Lower East End buildings?
Lower East End, this one obviously.
Yeah.
I like 625 Queen Street.
Queen Street.
There is Sink.
Yeah, Sink.
I like right there.
Streetcar.
Lower Jarvis.
Lower Jarvis, okay.
Yeah, those are
Because
probably my top.
Regent has all the new buildings.
Yeah, Regent has some nice ones.
Distillery,
Distillery has some nice ones.
you know? Are there any buildings that you would say red flag, like be like wary if you're gonna buy in there?
Joe Schuster Way.
Joe Schuster Way,
36
right?
Lisgar.
36 Lisgar, right? We're laughing because there's tons of lawsuits there, right? 68 Bell, right?
Yeah.
You know, your agents should be able to help open up conversations and help guide you on questions and answers, right?
And I think you're in the field. You're there every day. You're opening up these doors.
Mm-hmm.
You're going into these open houses on behalf of your clients. You're getting a good feel. You're talking to other agents, the synergies of, hey, what do you have coming up? Like you got the pulse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just have like just MLS.ca, I think.
Realtor.ca, yeah.
Realtor.ca, so that's it.
Is there a builder, Sab, is there a builder that you would avoid, like just
Yes.
not buy from? What's one of those?
Gupta.
Gupta, you know?
Actually, someone asked me, they were like, oh, we have a new project, you know, can you push this? I'm like, who's a developer? It's like Gupta. I'm like, absolutely not.
Right? So knowing these things and kind of getting familiar with someone who's foot on the ground, finger on the market, I think is the first step. Second thing is, who else do you need? All right? So when you buy a home, the first person, who here watches NFL football? Yes? No? Nobody? So you need your real estate agent who's kind of like your quarterback, all right? But you also need someone to run with the ball. Maybe that's your lawyer, all right? Who goes to the end zone. You might need someone who is, passing, right? Which is maybe your lender, your mortgage professional. There's a whole slew of people in addition to that you'll need. You'll need an insurance provider. When you close the property, you have to have home insurance. And a good insurance provider should be able to guide you on things like, do you need mortgage insurance? What is title insurance for, etc. Right? You'll need a home inspector. Generally speaking, for the last few years, we've been buying properties without conditions, but now conditions are back in offers. You can actually buy a home and do an inspection on the home, or buy a condo and read over all the condo docs and even do an inspection on the condo, right? Who else do we need on the team for buying a home? Insurance, it's good to have a series of trades, right? Lawyers, right? Insurance, movers, right? So think of it like a whole football team, right? And everybody plays a part helping you score this goal of yours, which is home ownership. All right, does everybody get that? Okay. Somebody said, when is a good time to buy, and what about investing? All right. So I'm gonna just plan two hacks for buying real estate. All right, and I'll tell one story, and then one story actually applies to both Justin and Sabrina, whom I've learned from. All right. So I have a cousin, and he came to this same event where we did it at, I think it was called Glow. The restaurant was called Glow. It shops at Don Mel's. I don't even know if it's still there, right? Alicia was with me at that time, all right? And we did this event, and I explained the equity thing, and him and his girlfriend at the time, they're like, really? Like, I didn't realize the equity grows like that fast. Very green, all right? I said, okay, well, Brad, like, how do you do this? Like, let's go on this real estate thing. And I said, okay, well, let's figure it out. So they bought a home, and I was telling you guys this story, right, Kira? They bought a home with no intention of ever living there. The first home that you buy, your first home purchase, doesn't necessarily have to be your place of residence, all right? It can be just a vehicle to get you to your place of residence. Does everybody get that? Like if you buy something in 2023 and you say, I'm gonna live with mom and dad, that is genius. Stay at home for as long as it makes sense, right? You know what most people do when they get their first full-time job out of school? What do?
Buy a car.
Who said buy a car? Buy a car, right? Everybody does the same thing. They buy a car and then maybe they take a vacation, right? That's consumption spending.
You know what I would do though? I'd get the house first, then buy the car. Because you'll always get a car loan. And that's going to be part of those calculations. So get the house and you think another trip. Then go get the car. Don't get the car first.
So remember,
okay? Especially if you're financing, leasing it.
So TDS, GDS, that car payment goes into the TDS ratio, all right? But everybody goes and buys a car, right? And a car is a depreciating asset. A house is an appreciating asset, right? Number one thing that I just want to plant as a seed is if you're living at home, maybe still buy something. Mitch said, get in the market. Get in the market. Get in the market. I said it 3 times, all right?
The best time to buy something, you're moving out.
Oh yeah. Guys, if I could go back